Well, it's different this time. I mean, what happened after the 2008 crash, which I predicted in the early to mid 80s that the US would predict in this long baby boom driven boom in late 2007 and start to go down for 12 to 15 years after that. The difference here is this time, when it did crash in 2008 and started to go down well into 2009, government stepped up and said, well, wait a minute, we've got new tools that we never knew we had before or never used. It's called printing money. We'll just run endless deficits and we'll print endless money. It wasn't the Federal Reserve chairman that started this. Mario Draghi in Europe said back when things started going down in 2008, he said, if any investors want to short this market, I will blow you out of the water. I will print so much money, you'll wish you'd never even thought about it. That's the beginning of what we're in now. So we've had this long downturn, what should have been from 2008 to 22. Baby boom generation peaked in their spending, biggest generation in history. They do it on a 46-year lag to the birth index, average peak spending in the United States, totally documentable, okay? But they have, between fiscal stimulus of 16 trillion and 8 trillion plus in monetary, they've just blown us out of this. They just printed enough money and ran enough deficits to make up for the decline of the 70% private sector. So that's what's happened here. And here we are still where markets have gone up because of that. And yet, where do we go from here? How do you stimulate more than that? And things are weakening again here. So I think we have put off what I call a Great Depression between 2008 to 22. We just put it off. So it's going to have to hit the second wave after 2008 to 9 into the next few years. Now, we'll have to see how markets react. But I'm telling you, this is not sustainable. You can't just print money out of thin air. And you cannot run endless deficits without compromising your own credit quality. I mean, people don't realize the US government is the best borrower in the world. We have the lowest rates for borrowing any entity in the world, which has allowed us to run unprecedented deficits, but you can't run unprecedented deficits without eventually getting into trouble. And I think that's why we're in trouble now. And we're still struggling. What happens next? I think this second greatest, longest bubble in history. And I'm just telling you, folks, if you go back and look at stocks, long term, if you think the roaring 20s was a big bubble or the mid to late 90s was a big bubble, look at this one since early 2009. Biggest, longest, fattest, badass bubble in history. And if this bubble doesn't burst, folks, I will quit my career and never be heard from again, okay? There is no way to burst this bubble with a soft landing because it is so extreme in the first place. We covered over what would have been the next 1930s decade-long depression. We've covered it over by simply printing money and running deficits. Both of these are printing money, by the way. You're just creating excess spending out of nothing. The difference is the government has to pay for it long term and the money supply growing up just can contract, but it doesn't matter. This cannot end well. And that's what I'm saying. And if it does end well in the next 2 to 3 years, I will quit my profession forever and never be heard from again. In the last several years or so, it's been in its 0 to 10% penetration. It's getting ready to explode in the 10 to 90%. The S-curve is the most powerful thing in history and why everything's exponential. It takes a while for something to prove itself. Think about us. Until we're kids, okay, we cost a lot of money. Do we produce much? No, we cause a lot of trouble. But once we enter the workforce at age 20 on average and go into our peak spending at 46 and our peak investing at 63, after that, we drive everything. And that's the way it is in innovations. And so AI and NVIDIA and crypto and Bitcoin, these are the next two big things, but they're still in their infancies, just breaking into the mainstream. So the demographics of the United States already peaked in late 2007 with the baby boomers, but the millennials take us back up to those levels in 2037 and then long-term plateau. So that's positive. But the main thing is that the technology cycles are what's going to drive this, and everything from biotech to AI, to crypto. People don't understand what crypto is. It restructures the entire financial assets and money sector of our economy, and it's the biggest number I have on earth. It's $630 trillion in financial assets and money in the world, 5 times the GDP globally. And that's what crypto does. And that's why Bitcoin and the crypto technology, the few that survive, by the way, this early stage. So we're in this infancy stage, right? Crypto's like in its 0 to 18 to 22, getting ready to burst into its 22 to 46 impact for a lifetime of a consumer on the economy. So again, the biggest point I try to make to people, because I grew up in a world that everybody, economists, I dropped my economics major in the 3rd course because economists said nobody can predict anything past the next election. I'm like, well, why am I listening to these guys? So I found my own way to predict the economy. Generational spending and productivity cycles as we age from 20, knowing everything, to 46, actually kind of knowing everything and being productive, and new technologies that come around every 45 and especially 90 years. We're in the 90-year super bubble cycle that's seen every major bubble back to 1835, 1929. And now these things are not accidental. They come in 4-stage cycles, okay? Youth, early adulthood, late adulthood, and retirement. And that makes everything predictable if you can put a number on it. And 46 is the peak of spending for the average person in this country, in most countries, 47. And that makes the economy way more predictable than anybody thought. That's why in the early to mid 80s, when everybody thought the US was dead, I said, no, we got the biggest baby boom in the world. We're going to have the greatest boom into 2007. Everybody said, you're crazy. That was just a fact, not even a question mark. Technology cycle is a 45-year cycle. The demographic cycle, the generation, is a 39-year cycle, okay? So these two things are actually coming together. The demographic cycle is kind of peaking, but the technology cycle was still roaring into 2019 to 20. Now, since then, both of them should have been down, and because of $27 trillion, 1.5 times the average GDP in that time, of stimulus, which is massive, unprecedented, hopefully will never happen again because we're going to see consequences for a long time from this aberration. But that's what's caused the technology cycle, which is just peaking in late 2019, early 2020, to be elevated. And now it's still going because when COVID hit and these cycles all went down naturally, same time, they printed more money than ever. $11 trillion out of the $27 trillion in just 2 years. So we're on 100% hot air stimulus here. And this is about to wear off now. So I'm saying, look out, everything looks fine, everything's gone back up, everything. No, this is where the stimulus, which is so huge, nobody in history would have ever predicted any government would go so crazy to do this, wears off, and they can't up it easily again because they already blew the wad. So I think the next few years is going to be difficult. And then the millennials are going to bring us out of this. And then we'll do well into 2037 and then plateau for a long time after that. We're seeing the peaking of North America between 2007 and 2037. And then, of course, it's all Asia after that. And eventually, long after I'm dead, Africa. They tightened the monetary side, which is only a third. The 27 trillion I quoted recently and since 2008 to overset this Great Depression, which is a lot of money, the whole economy and more, the drop on the economy. That's the difference. The monetary has pulled back. The deficit spending, the fiscal stimulus, is going straight forward at full blast. That's why we're not feeling the pullback, and the quote unquote tightening only happened on 1/3 the monetary side. And nobody calculates that. I'm like, did economists just go to sleep after the 1960s and 70s? I mean, really, I hate to say it. I mean, I started off as an economics major, and after the 3rd course, I'm like, this is useless, vague stuff. How could you learn anything from this? I was learning more from my marketing and management courses and finance courses. So I studied everything else and then came back with my own economic theory in the 1980s, discovering these generational cycles, which are everything, and the technology cycles, which long-term are even more. Those two things, a 39-year generational cycle peak and a 45-year innovation technology peak, those are the two cycles that most drive our economy. And I can tell you where these cycles are going to go over the rest of our lifetimes and our kids. And economists can't figure out what's going to happen in the next 2 years. It's ridiculous. We need a recession. People don't realize how much are we awake? 16, 17 hours every day. How much do we sleep and seemingly do nothing? 6, 7, 8 hours. So is sleep a waste of time? Well, try not sleeping for 3 nights. You'll discover quickly you'll be a crazy person and totally dysfunctional. We need booms to expand the past technologies and to accommodate the new rising, say, generation demographic. But we need busts to consolidate and get rid of the waste and the bad stuff and get efficient to prepare for the next boom. Recessions are the enemy of the Federal Reserve. And I'm like, it tells me Federal Reserve chairman who've never had sex or run a business have no clue what actually drives the economy. All of our great innovations come in bad times like the 30s and 40s and the 1870s and 80s in the long depression. All the innovations come when we're challenged. They don't come when we're in a boom like the roaring 20s. How many great innovations happened in the roaring 20s or the 1950s and 60s? Almost none is the answer. The economy is a play of opposites. If you don't understand that, you shouldn't even aspire to be an economist. I took economics and quit because they didn't understand this, re-examined all of history, and I went back to 8,000 years ago, the beginning of modern civilization, the agricultural revolution, and recharted all types of cycles and stuff around this 4-stage innovate, growth boom, shake out the excesses, maturity boom, bring it to the masses, and then decline and bring in the new technologies to replace you. This is the cycle that drives new generations from young to peak spending to old, drive our economy. These are the two things, and economists don't even study either of them.